Let's go to God in a time of prayer. May the words of my mouth and the meditations of all of our hearts be acceptable to you, O Lord, our rock and our redeemer. Amen. Well, you are probably familiar with the age-old trick of playing dead, right? Sometimes actually it can be very convincing. Maybe not so much this one, little sign that says, "Do not disturb, I'm dead." Maybe. Well, hence the mortician to his understudy. This is to make sure that no one is faking it. Any people with ticklish feet around here? Definitely me for sure. In the animal kingdom, there are quite a lot of animals that stash this little trick of playing dead in their back pocket, usually to avoid death, but also to prime for an attack or to increase odds of mating, strangely, in the case of the male nursery web spider, or to avoid mating at all costs by crashing and burning to the ground like the moorland hawker dragonfly. You gotta love that commitment, when you really want something. In Japan, pygmy grasshoppers will play dead by sticking out their legs in several directions, making it nearly impossible for frogs to swallow them. I don't know how they figure that one out. Maybe they watch someone do it, but that's pretty brilliant. Rabbits, even they have been known to play dead or to sleep, whichever this one is right here. Some frogs, like the Burmeister leapfrog, they've learned to really sell it in the cutest possible way. I don't think that it gets any cuter than that. The eastern hog-nosed snake, appropriately named, got a big old hog snout there, is no stranger to that strange practice of playing dead. And finally, the lemon shark. Wrong. The lemon, nope, that's not the one either. What I was trying to say was the lemon, eventually we will get there. Okay, this is just getting weird. Who's playing with my slides? Who hijacked my slides this morning? Who was it, one of you? No, I'm just kidding. The lemon shark, which gets its name for having a yellowish hue in certain lights. When it's inverted and held in place for a few moments, it goes into tonic immobility, which mimics death. And then, sorry, that wasn't the last one. Of course, the Tony Award-winning thespian of the animal kingdom, North America's finest, Virginia Possum. Or as this artist titles her art piece, "Amateur possum actress, darling." Just kidding, I added the darling for effect, but yeah, I love that, the title of this art, amateur possum actress. But let's be real. When you go so far as to open your mouth, stick out your tongue, which is not pictured here, but anyway, empty your bowels and let loose foul-smelling fluids to convince your predator that your expiration date has passed, can you really call it amateur at that point? I mean, to me, that's like professional level acting once you get to that level. So maybe that's why cartoonists have chosen the possum as the go-to subject for their playing dead cartoons, like this one. Why weren't you playing bereaved when I was playing dead? Come on, play along a little bit. Or this married couple, you can play dead all you want. We're still going to see my parents. And then for all you introverts out there, he's fine. He's just playing dead. He just plays dead when he's had enough socializing. So another trick in your book if you're ever feeling a little bit overwhelmed at a party. Welcome to the Sunday after Easter, dubbed Bright Sunday, one of the most joy-filled and refreshing Sundays of the year, in my opinion. I first learned about it actually in my first year here at Palmdale UMC from Pastor Jon, who in turn was clued in by a colleague in Hawaii about 20 years ago. It's also called Holy Humor Sunday. And this old Easter custom originated with the early Greek Christians. It's been observed as a day of joy and laughter with parties and picnics to celebrate Jesus' resurrection. And Bright Sunday is a response to the joyous wonder of Easter that comes on the heel of a solemn week of Jesus' betrayal, trial, lashing, and death. A former pastor of the First United Methodist Church in Ann Arbor, Michigan, has a good way of describing the significance of Bright Sunday. Reverend Donald B. Strobe describes Easter as God's supreme joke played on that old imposter, death. Now, I don't think we usually imagine God as a jokester. I highly doubt you'll see God guest starring on an episode of Impractical Jokers anytime soon. But there is plenty of reason to believe that God is a joyful God who has a sense of humor, possibly gets a little pleasure out of surprising, nay, shocking us with good news. There's a Presbyterian minister named April Fiat who writes in her online blog, "For some reason, many of us have equated devout spirituality with seriousness, which is tragic. Joy and laughter can lead us to healing. Sometimes God's grace comes to us in the form of humor that helps us make it through another day," right? There's certainly a place for serious piety, but there's also a place for humor and levity. Think of what happens when we start to believe that you have to be completely businesslike, stiff upper-lipped, restrained in order to get your spiritual act together. Maybe you know someone that kind of takes that approach. Maybe that was you at some point in your life. I remember in high school, once I was described as austere by my girlfriend's mother when my girlfriend was trying to make sense of my version of the straight and narrow. And I was like maybe a little bit too uptight and just maybe a bit too, serious. Well, reality check, I was kind of, and her mother was actually right. And it is, in fact, possible to take yourself too seriously, and that's not usually good for the people around you. So the founder of our United Methodist tradition, John Wesley, said this: "Sour godliness is the devil's religion." I suspect that sour godliness originated among unhappy, semi-religious people who had just enough religion to make them miserable, but not enough to do them any good. So there you have it. Sour godliness. And maybe that's what the lemon shark was having trouble with, all that, that's a dumb joke. It didn't get any laughs in the first service. Why would I try this the next one? Who cares? They say that misery loves company, but here's another observation. Easter joy makes a brighter, more united community. It's the antidote to sour godliness. You can't help but come alive and be filled with joy when the resurrected Jesus comes to find you. Thinking about the stories from the gospel when Jesus brings people like Jairus' daughter or Lazarus back to life, Robert Farrar Capon writes, thinking about those, they all rise, not because Jesus has a number on them, not because he put some magical resurrection machinery into gear, but simply because he has that effect on the dead. They rise because he is the resurrection, even before he himself rises. Because, in other words, he is the grand sacrament, the real presence of the mystery of a kingdom in which everybody rises, which I think is an especially potent quote when we are celebrating communion, recognizing the presence of God among us. See, Jesus walking out of that tomb means new life for all of us, and it means that even now. Wouldn't it be amazing to be there to see that happen, Jesus walking out of the tomb, to be a part of that incredible history-changing moment? In a book called Holy Humor, Cal and Rose Samra retell this resurrection story. They say, Mary Rose Benton, Catholic lay leader and playwright, was directing the children's Easter performance and overseeing the casting so that each child felt comfortable with their role. One boy insisted that he wanted to be the rock in front of the garden tomb. Wouldn't you like to have a speaking role? She asked him, but nope, he would have no other. That is what he wanted to do. He wanted to be that rock in front of the garden tomb. The presentation went smoothly. Once again, after the presentation was over, she asked the boy, why he wanted to play the rock. His smile beamed at her. Oh, it just felt so good to let Jesus out of the tomb. Kids are, say, the cutest things in the entire world. Well, lead role or living stage prop alike, Jesus comes to bring them all together into the joy and hope that resurrection brings. And that's exactly what we see in the story from the Gospel of Luke, where Jesus raises a little girl back to life, unites the community in awe and wonder. And it starts off like this. Now, when Jesus returned, the crowd welcomed him, for they were all waiting for him. Just then, there came a man named Jairus, a leader of the synagogue. He fell at Jesus' feet, and he began pleading with him to come to his house, for he had an only daughter about 12 years old, and she was dying. Here we have a respected man from the community, a leader of the synagogue, which scholars think might mean he was a patron of it, sort of like a chairman of the board, falling down at Jesus' feet, desperately pleading for his daughter's life. And what parent wouldn't, right? He's heard about Jesus and what Jesus can do. Perhaps there's hope for his daughter yet. Biblical scholars Eugene Boring and Fred Craddock write this: the story, which is a prefiguration of the resurrection of Jesus, declares that even when it's too late, it's not too late. Let that sink in for you for a second, right? When it comes to God, even when it's too late, it's not too late. Sometimes God can shock us with what is actually possible. In his book, The Whole Language, The Power of Extravagant Tenderness, Father Gregory Boyle continues his many tales of being a director and a pastor of Homeboy Industries in LA, the world's largest gang intervention and rehabilitation program. And I realize that sharing stories of people who have been through like the deepest trenches of life probably isn't what you'd expect on a supposedly lighthearted day, but these are the sorts of stories that remind us that hope can emerge from hopelessness, that laughter can follow despair, that the shadowy cloud of near death can be swept away to reveal the brightness of a new day and new life. Toward the middle of this book, Father Gregory Boyle shares about going with two former gang members to a Thursday evening talk at a Catholic parish in Orange County, close to Disneyland. And this is what he says. Speaking of one of them is named Abel. Abel speaks first. His gait is uncertain. He drags one leg and one arm is curled up some. He was shot 33 times, in a coma for 6 months, and spent a year and a half recuperating in the hospital. Someone in the office once asked him, "Why are you smiling and laughing all the time?" He simply said, "I've been through too much not to smile and laugh." It takes some time for him to reach the podium. He gets there and silently surveys his audience, moving his head back and forth. Finally, he speaks. "Well, G told us we were going to Disneyland, and we ended up here." The entire church roared with laughter that was quite sustained. He has them exactly where he wants them. He tells his story at some length. The audience is spellbound, indeed reverent. Abel then winds down. "Well, I better end this, or you'll start throwing tomatoes." A charming end to a gripping story that won the hearts and minds of the people there. The three of us stand up there to field questions after a 45-minute talk. The first question out of the gate is for Abel. "What led you to Homeboy Industries?" We wait for Abel to make his way to the podium. Having all heard his story, there is a collective admiration now for the difficulty of his pace. "Well," he says, "I heard they were having pizza." Huge laugh. Then he says with some giant gentleness, "Everyone loves pizza." Abel is abiding in himself, and it's a revolutionary act. It turns the world on its head, and people know the poignancy of it, that we are all connected and born wanting the same things. Yes, everyone loves pizza. If you were to flip about 10 pages forward in that same book, the story circles back around to Abel again. This time to show what it means, what can happen when new life gives birth to new life against all odds. Boyle writes, I was talking with Abel, the one who reminds us that everyone loves pizza. He's been one of our tour guides lately, and we always assign a new trainee to shadow the more experienced tour guide, like Abel. He was telling me that he saw this guy walk in one day. He was the guy who shot me, he said. And then he said, you hired him. I don't know who he's talking about, but now the shooter is shadowing Abel and listening intently to the story that he shares with groups, large and small. You give good tours, Abel Shadow tells him. What we do at Homeboy Industries is restorative justice. We restore people to wholeness, health, and fullness of their own truth. None of us are whole until all of us are whole. Surely part of this is what Paul Tillich believed was the core of Christian faith, to accept the fact that we have been accepted. This is certainly what Jesus believed, that none of us are whole until all of us are whole. This is why Jesus agreed to go with Jairus to his house to heal his daughter. See, if she continues to suffer, the community suffers. Many in the community will feel the weight of it, not just the parents. One person's pain can cast a shadow on many others. However, if this little girl is saved, it is a bright Sunday, a reason to celebrate for everyone in that community, something that uplifts the whole community. The story goes on like this. While he was still speaking, someone came from the synagogue leader's house to say, your daughter is dead. Do not trouble the teacher any longer. When Jesus heard this, he replied, do not be afraid. Only believe, and she will be saved. When he came to the house, he did not allow anyone to enter with him except Peter, John, and James, and the child's father and mother. Everyone was weeping and grieving for her, but he said, do not cry, for she is not dead, but sleeping. And they laughed at him, knowing that she was dead. There's a really interesting mix of laughter and somberness in this story, right? Life is pretty messy like that, isn't it? Right? This feels true to what life is really like. And death, it evokes many different emotions and responses. A Quaker humorist once said, our theology should enable us to see God as one in whom we can trust, even in the middle of the ultimate fear, which is death. If we can laugh in the crisis of death, that's one way of saying that God is in charge. See, I seem to remember someone else who laughed in the face of danger. I recognize this person, I'm sure you do. Well, not person line. But just like Simba, the people who laugh at Jesus in our story from Luke have come to learn how real a threat death really is. And so, it's so real that the people around Jesus laugh at him for even suggesting that there is hope for this young girl who is, as it seems, has breathed her last breath. And you can understand why they react that way, right? I mean, Jesus is suggesting something that maybe seems a bit absurd. David Forney writes this, perhaps the laughter was mockery or embarrassment or anger at such a cruel joke, but we often laugh at things that we do not understand and cannot control. And indeed, there is a lot in life that we cannot control. I've discovered in the last couple years that the wild and elusive species of toddler is not an easy thing to take care of. And that often gives me a laugh almost every single day. Someone once commented, the fastest land animal is a toddler who's been asked, what's in your mouth? Thankfully, we've never really had to worry about that so much with Julian, but he is fast nonetheless. He always seems the fastest when he's making a break for it out of the church service right there in the lobby. It's like he wants to leave or something. What's up with that? Come on, no one else is feeling that way. No, but suffice it to say, toddlers, they got legs, all right? And maybe that's why one manufacturer invented the toddler tamers. It's a leashless ankle weight system. Put the weight in weight right here. Simply fill with water, sand, or syrup. Obviously, this is a prank that someone on the internet came up with. But between you and me, where can I buy those? I think we need those. They even came up with a fake comment in the comment section. This is a bad product. You might have a temporary control over your tot, but you're going to make it stronger. What's worse than an uncontrollable baby? An uncontrollable baby who has never missed leg day and could kill you with one kick. Whoa. Yeah, maybe they should, don't bring that, let's not bring that to market after all. I like how one person makes the joke about how tiring and difficult it is to be a parent sometimes, and they write sarcastically, some parents run a tight ship. I run a pirate ship. There's some swearing, some drinking, and a touch of mutiny from the tiny raiders I created. I'm not one for swearing or imbibing too much, but I can relate how it can feel like a pirate ship sometimes. Julian, that little tiny raider trying to throw us off course, as much as we love him. So, back to the story from Luke. Whatever type of laughter people were enjoying, the laughter is definitely being directed at Jesus. No one likes to be laughed at, right? Especially when it's from the people that you love. Richard Vinson has an interesting take on something that potentially could have happened, which would have made this an even harder thing to take. He says, it's even possible that Luke intends us to think that those mocking Jesus are Peter, John, James, and the mother and father, indicating that Jairus had lost hope entirely. Yet, Jesus offers peace, salvation, hope, life, instead of fear and cynicism. I don't know, maybe that is what happened. Maybe those were the closest ones to Jesus, were the ones that were laughing, or maybe it was just the people that were already in the house. But either way, Jesus offers peace and hope, not fear and cynicism, which is amazing to me in spite of all the laughter coming at him. I don't know about you, but as soon as I start getting laughed at, defenses come up, turtle shell comes down, it's like, I don't really feel too generous in that moment. Maybe you know someone, though, who is gracious enough to handle a little jeering and can still keep that bigger picture in mind. Someone who is able to take things not quite so seriously and show love and graciousness anyway. Who is that in your life, I wonder? What can you learn from them? In our story, Jesus claims that the girl is only sleeping. Now, this girl is not sleeping, not in a literal sense. Sleeping, of course, is powering down to let your body recharge. It's something that parents of infants remember as mere fairy tales, something from of old. Sleeping is finally succumbing to that feeling that you've been fighting when the preacher is giving a 30-minute sermon, your eyelids are making the decision for you. Which, by the way, no judgment if you do. As Monsignor Arthur Ton writes, I go to sleep by counting sheep. I preach to sheep I put to sleep. It's amazing that Jesus doesn't get reeled into the drama by the naysayers. He doesn't seem to take things personally somehow. He's not triggered by the laughs. Instead, as Luke tells us, Jesus only offers a simple message: do not be afraid, only believe, and she will be saved. This distinction that Luke draws between the naysayers and Jesus is an invitation for us as listeners to choose which one we will be today. And in many ways, it is a choice. Patrick Wilson writes about the naysayers this: we are well acquainted with people so expert in their knowledge and finally so expert in their hopelessness that they cannot entertain the possibility of God interrupting their certainty. Knowledge merely funds cynicism. They know only enough to despair. They think of themselves as realistic, tough-minded. Nobody's fool. They know how to manage the numbers. They know about death, though life is notoriously more complex and confusing. They simply do not know and cannot recognize the power of God's salvation breaking into their midst. See, Jesus invites those around him and us today to imagine a way of life that is fueled by the hope of what God can do, especially in making the community whole. Brene Brown, an author, professor, and social worker, claims that hope is not an emotion, In her book, Rising Strong, she talks about how hope is a cognitive process. It's a muscle that we stretch and strengthen. It's something that's learned. It's something that's developed, often strengthened, though, through our experience of failure. So those who are laughing at Jesus have allowed their life experiences of failing and falling to automatically discount what Jesus has to say instead of seeing it as an opportunity for something new. They're still learning what it means to rise. And so Brene Brown says, "There's no greater threat to the critics and cynics and fear-mongers than those of us who are willing to fall because we have learned to rise." It's a powerful quote. The story finishes this way. But taking her by the hand, he called out, "Child, get up." Her spirit returned. She stood up at once, and he directed them to give her something to eat. Her parents were astounded, but he ordered them to tell no one what had happened. See, in this story, this is no April Fool's trick. It is no charade, no elaborate prank being played on these people. It's no Big Bite hot dog sparkling water that 7-Eleven released in limited supply as an April Fool's joke. Nope. It is no April Fool's sour cream and onion soda, which sounds absolutely disgusting, and I hope they never make this in reality. It is no Dole banana peel sleeping bag, which I honestly think sounds really cool, and I would buy one if they had it. It is no Mopsy full-body cleaning suit, complete with baby Mopsy for free. It is no sriracha mayo toothpaste, nor a baby translator April Fool's joke that decodes babies' coos and cries instantly. No, it's no April Fool's joke from any big brand that tries to fool us. This is the real deal. With only a few words, "Child, get up." The young girl's lungs fill up with air again. She stands up. She eats food that's brought to her there in Jesus' presence like a sacred meal of communion, tasting God's grace in many different ways. And then she falls into the arms of her tear-drenched parents. Edna Jacobs Baines writes this: "One theological theme of these stories is the movement from isolation to community." Not only does Jesus restore her to health, he restores her to community. The young girl is surrounded by community, but is no longer a part of it, for she has died. In restoring the girl to life, Jesus also returns her to full participation in that community. Restoration to life, restoration to community, a community that is more whole than it was before. That is the Easter promise. Although, as we contemplate about community, let's be honest, real, authentic, life-giving, fully embracing community does not come easy, right? I think you know this. It does not, right? As a third grader named Nan once wrote, "Dear God, I bet it's very hard for you to love all of everybody in the whole world. There are only 4 people in our family, and I can never do it." And for the young adults trying to manage those countless responsibilities and somehow maintain a semblance of a social life, nobody talks about Jesus' miracle of having 12 close friends in their 30s. I relate to that. Yet, in a very real way, the power of Jesus' presence among us compels us to believe that a hopeful life together is indeed possible. The joy of Easter that we bask in a week later is the joy to be generously shared. It's a joy that will piece us back together. It's a joy that we can give to one another when one of us is feeling joyless. It's a joy that brings hope even when there is no hope. It's a joy that brings resurrection. None of us are whole until all of us are whole. Amen?